Dr. Bowins. Today we're going to talk about your book, Outing the Truth About Sexual Orientation. What is the truth?
The truth is that we right now understand it in a way that's false. So we have truth and falseness. We understand it as discrete homosexual and heterosexual identities which only partially align with the reality. A key component of the reality is that all of us have separate homoerotic and heteroerotic capacities, even though we vary on the level that we have. And for example, a person who identifies as being homosexual would have a high homoerotic and a lower heteroerotic. But we have both capacities derived from animal templates.
So are you saying that homosexuality and heterosexuality are not real?
They only partially align with the reality. We love our identities. We form identities wherever possible. And this relates to in-group, out-group distinctions. We form those identities. So no, they're not real entities. Homosexuality and heterosexuality have only really existed for about 200-300 years, corresponding to industrialization. Before that, it was never understood in that way at all.
Why is there so much discrimination against homosexuals?
When you frame homosexual and heterosexual identities, when you set those, what it does is it activates in-group, out-group distinctions. We are very good at forming those distinctions, as psychological research has shown through decades. And this probably derives from our hunting and gathering evolutionary past, when we had to distinguish friend, relative from enemy, foe. And so once you set up that distinction, members of the in-group, if you're heterosexual, are favored, and the out-group discriminated against. It just flows naturally.
Dr. Bowins, what do you hope to see change from your book, Outing the Truth About Sexual Orientation?
I'd like to see the truth come out. That's one reason I put that word in the title. The truth about something is important because it aligns with science. Like, what is the science of it? But beyond that sort of more academic slant, I see in my practice as a psychiatrist a lot of suffering of people who've been persecuted, discriminated against because they are homosexual or were seen as being homosexual, some cases not even actually homosexual. And I also see a lot of inner turmoil. So I want to see the system, or the perspective on it changed so as to reduce that type of suffering.
What other aspects are there beyond homoerotic and heteroerotic dimensions?
This is a 4-component model. The first component are the homo and heteroerotic dimensions. The second component is the activation and deactivation. The brain works largely on a pattern of activation, deactivation. And with these homoerotic and heteroerotic dimensions, they can be activated or deactivated by circumstances. This aligns with research showing that certain settings, such as same-sex boarding schools, will seemingly elicit more homoerotic behavior. According to my model, that's activating the dimension. The next component, or the sort of third, is the erotic fantasy. Humans, with our mental capacity, we have a lot of erotic fantasy. It's actually a whole nother layer of sexuality, and maybe even more important than behavior. Whereas for animals, it's mostly just behavior, or seemingly so. And in this model, erotic fantasy is an activating influence, that if you have an experience and then fantasize about it, it activates that dimension, the relevant dimension. The last component is social construction. It's not just whether things are or are not, it's how we frame them or how we socially construct them. And the social construction of sexual orientation is very important. It's been understood in many different ways throughout time. Now we construct it as distinct homosexual and heterosexual identities. And that construction has a way of deactivating the less powerful dimension.
I've heard of the evolutionary paradox of homosexuality. What exactly is that?
The evolutionary or Darwinian paradox of homosexuality basically is how can a behavior, homosexuality, that doesn't lead to reproduction ever evolve? The answer is it can't. There's some explanations that have come out, and all of them are extremely weak, whereas my concept explains it easily. It just eliminates the paradox, because you can act according to both, even within the given period of time.